This class is haircutting theory. How, why, what, when. It's not specifically haircut specific, but it's the basics. Now I will say this, every advanced, and I put that in quotes, advanced class I've taken takes me back to here. I've paid hundreds of dollars for them to take me back here. So if you've heard this information before, then hopefully something will connect a little differently today and sink further. Because every time they start off with the basics, I'm like, really? I think I paid $300 for this class. Why are we talking about this? But there's so much in depth to this foundation of cutting that when you have a clearer understanding, you can then visualize what you're actually trying to do. And that visualization, where the guest is trying to be and your plan to get there, is so crucial. And there's no, like with a color formula, you can run in the back room and say, hey, what do I put in this bowl? But you know the application. You can't do that in the middle of a haircut. Like, oh no, you've already gone, you know, put the wrong formula in the bowl and you're half applied. What do you do then? You know, so this is really important for a level of understanding how to fix a mistake, how to thin out thick hair, long to short, where to start, learning when to create the correct elevation. Oops, I messed up, now what? We are gonna talk about correct elevation. If you mess up, what you do and what not to do. There's a bigger what not to do when you mess up, not what to do. Old lady haircuts, how to start. So when we create a plan, that's gonna be your plan. You and I discussed that, so I want that to be your plan to answer that question for you. Texturizing, how high is too high to cut? I want to be able to know when a client doesn't know what they want. Me too. Sometimes there is, you get it wrong. Sometimes, I mean, I have gotten it wrong many times in the 20-something years I've been doing this. 23 years, holy crap. So you might get it wrong. It's really trying to decipher, and that's through consultation. And that's why we keep having so many, well, we were having so many consultation classes, because you can't have enough. You can't dig deep enough, and we live in an area where you get new people constantly. So you have to quickly discover who they are, how they are, what their life is, how to do a proper point cut. Oh yes, we're gonna talk about that. Don't let me leave class without talking about that. And tips about bangs. Okay, we can hit on those last two. They're not in class, but we can hit on those because they're easily answered, I feel like. So what I want to talk about today is when the client sits down and they show you a picture. How do you create that picture? Or you know the end result they're going for. Where do you start? What do you do? What's the thoughts that you need to actually be having to even create a plan? Does that make sense? And there's three parts to that. It's the map that's gonna go on the head, so the sectioning, which is super important. Sectioning is everything. Now, if you watch your senior stylist, it might look like they don't section, unless you watch Lisa, because I've watched her cut. It might look like they don't section. Maybe they're not using clips. Maybe their sections don't look clean to you, and they're combing it to separate it. But I promise you, if they're precision cutting, they are using sections. But it might just not look the way it needs to in the beginning when you're new. When you're new, it needs to be clipped and out of your way and only the area you're working on, because you'll get lost. As a senior stylist, they're still doing those things. They're just using the hair to move it, maybe not clips, but you should be clipping. There's no doubt in my mind. Okay, so sectioning is the first step, and you have to know what your sections do, or how to section, or when do I choose this section over that section. So how thick should a section be? When you're choosing a section, how thick should it be? A half inch, a comb's width.
You can see your hand through it, or
you can see your hand through it. What would determine how much on the head I would take? Because it's never guaranteed a half-inch section. That's never a guaranteed, or it's never a comb's width, or it's never. Just tell me what you said. The texture and what did you say? The density. How thick is the hair, and what's the texture I'm working with? If the lady has 10 hairs on her head, I'm probably not taking little minute sections, because then I'm going to find hair to cut that doesn't exist. If they have 100 pounds of hair on their head, if you take the same size section as you did with the lady with 10 hairs on her head, you're not gonna be able to see through it to see your guide. You're not gonna be able to manage it. So what you're working with actually determines how big each section is. And also what the end result is that they want, because some haircuts require smaller sections just because of the haircut it is. Does that make sense? So the first thing is evaluating the hair you're working on so it doesn't just fall into this perfect category, because if it did, we would just go, this is how you cut this haircut. But you all have been cutting long enough, I feel like, to have made discoveries where you did the same exact thing twice and the end result was completely different. Would you agree with me? Where you've layered and you're like, I layered just like that last time. Why does it look like this? Mm-hmm. It's because you're working on a different head of hair. You can do that haircut 15 times, exactly the same, and have 15 different end results, because curly and straight hair act differently, because thick and thin hair act differently, and there's 15 different hair types. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then you have their head and how their head is shaped that then plays a part. So we're not really talking about those things today, because you have to determine hair type and head shape and all of those things on top of all of this. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So these are the rules, but they apply differently on different hair types. But you have to know the rules before you can apply them. So those are kind of what we're kind of diving into today, is what they do. But a vertical section that's 2 inches wide and a vertical section that's a 1/2 inch wide does the same thing, but I might need it differently on different people. Make sense? So we're gonna start with sectioning, because that's our map, that's where we're going. We can't cut anything unless we separate it. So there's 3 types of sectioning: horizontal, vertical, diagonal. Everybody knows what those are, right? Okay. But when we're using a map, we're deciding, is the hair gonna be heavy or light? So if the hair is gonna be heavy, what type of haircut would I be doing? A blunt, that's a heavier haircut. If it's going to be lighter, what type of haircut would it be? Layers. So knowing that, you probably automatically already use these interchangeably, but don't even realize it. So when you're then doing a haircut that you don't know, you have to then say, am I making it heavy or am I making it light? Does that make sense? Like when somebody shows you a picture and says, I want this, the first thing you gotta say is this layers, isn't this layers? If it's not layers, then I'm gonna use horizontal all the way through, because I'm gonna bring it down and cut it to the same point. Whether that's shorter in the front, longer in the back, longer in the front, shorter in the back, doesn't matter. It still has to be maintaining weight, correct? So then vertical does the exact opposite. It removes weight. But think of when you're layering. Aren't you taking vertical sections generally all the way around the head? And then you're going to do whatever you do from that. And then diagonal is where everyone gets lost, because it's in between the two. It builds weight and it creates movement or direction. So when I say build weight, what does that mean? Like, what do you think when I say that? Yes?
When you want to like stack it in the back. I know for diagonal everyone thinks graduation, but that's just like the perfect example where you get that build right there.
Right, so when you're building that stack in the back, let's say. Does everybody clear when I say stack? If a client says wedge, that is a stack. It's just an old version of, okay? What were you gonna say? Body. So if I want to build some body, if they don't have a lot of hair and I want to build into it, I probably want to use a diagonal line. Okay, so when it says create direction of movement, what does that mean?
The diagonal forward means longer in the front, diagonal back and longer in the back.
So putting a diagonal on it means it's going to be longer somewhere and shorter somewhere. So if I'm doing a inverted bob, right, because we can all visualize that, it's shorter in the back, longer in the front, I need a diagonal line to create that. But how diagonal is the question, right? It's like, how steep do I make this? Well, a diagonal lives between vertical and horizontal, yes? Mm-hmm. So it can be vertical diagonal, or it can be horizontal diagonal. Mind blown yet? Lost yet? If it's more vertical, what is it going to do?
It's
be steeper.
It's going to be steeper, sharper, heavier, or lighter? Lighter. If it is more horizontal, what is it going to be? Heavier. So if someone shows you a kind of low profile, right, slightly inverted, what's your line going to be? Horizontal diagonal. And forward, we'll get there. Right? It's got to be that line because it's slow movement forward. It's minimal. It's not edgy. It's not steep. If they want a really severe, it's going to be more vertical. Does that make sense? And obviously drawing the line in the direction you want it to go. Also think about this. Layers, shorter in the front, longer in the back. That's very popular right now. We got the, oh my God, my mind just went blank. The bangs, what the heck are the bangs? The curtain bangs that fall into layers, thank you. It's like, I don't know the things. What are these things right here? So yes, the drapes. I don't know that anybody is asking for drapes. So the curtain bang that falls into layers that blend, that's super common right now. Well, they're layers, so what type of section angle are we gonna use? We're removing weight. Vertical, right? We're removing weight. So we're going to draw verticals all the way around the head. But the hair is shorter in the front and longer in the back. What angle could we put on it? I love it. Okay, hold on. Now, do not laugh at the way I draw a head shape. It has been posted to social media before because apparently it's not cute. But you get the idea. This is a head, yes? That's an ear, that's a nose, eyeball. You with me? Yeah, that's an ear. It's like squealy. You with me?
Why is the ear near the nose? Why is the ear on the
Everybody does understand that this is the front of the head, yes? That is the only purpose of this drawing. Okay, so it's going to be shorter in the front, longer in the back, yes? Because the layers are shorter in the front, longer in the back. Yes. So we determined that we're using a vertical line up and down, but we want to put a slight angle on it because it's shorter somewhere. So if I want it to be shorter in the front and longer in the back, and I'm going to be a little bit dramatic with this line, this sectioning, it would be like this. And here's why. Where is it going to be shorter? In the front. So the way that you know your diagonal is correctly sectioned, if I put a ball at the top of this line, where would it roll? Backwards or forwards? It's going to roll this way, yes? That's where your length is going to be. If it rolled on the line, okay. Whoa, see, this is why we have to be very clear with when we speak, right? If it rolled down this line, it's going to go to the back of the head. That's where your weight is going to roll based on this line. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Maybe yes. So. Okay. Yes. If the line did this, where would the weight roll? Forward. Forward. So maybe I want shorter layers here.
I was just going to say, in conjunction with your ball rolling on the line and
yes.
pushing it to the back, shorter hair moves longer hair. It pushes it and moves it. So kind of keep that in mind with your ball there. So when you want it heavier or longer, it's the short hair is going to move the longer hair. Same thing in texturizing.
Say that again?
Yes.
Say it.
Short hair moves long hair. So it pushes it. It's going to push forward.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying? If you cut it like that, and the ball, she said,
so forget this line.
Too, I'm
here.
like, I think it would roll down your nose, but I didn't know what you were saying.
Yes. That's what she said too. So I'm like, no, wait. Down the line.
I just thought of that. I thought, you know, short hair pushes and it moves long hair. Texturizing, which is off the subject real quick, just to give you another example. When you go in and texturize the hair at the scalp, it pushes the long hair up, so it moves it. So short hair moves long hair, that's all I'm saying. Whether it's cut diagonal forward, diagonal back.
It's the same effect that you get with the tissue, something like that. Is that what you mean? Something like that? Because it will give...
No.
That's against volume, but when you're cutting hair,
Yes. So think about this. A curtain bang is shortest. A curtain bang is shortest where?
Here in the front.
In the center. And where does it push? Does it push to the center or does it push out? The short hair pushes that heavier hair out of the way. In an inverted bob, where is it shortest? In the back. Can you blow dry an inverted bob and the hair go backwards? Or is it always going to fall forward? Forward, because the short hair in the back will not allow you to style it that way. So that's what she's saying. Wherever you're shortest, it's going to push the weight away from there. So if you want to, I mean, these are things you have to think about when haircutting. If they don't like something about their face and they don't want you to point at it, you need to push away from it. Does that make sense? So sometimes they'll say, well, I don't want this to show. So you can't like point at their jaw, and everyone will say if they feel overweight. I'm not gonna say if they're overweight because I've had skinny people sit in my chair and say, my face is fat. I'm like, where? Okay, they say their face is round. It's not. They still have a face shape underneath that. So you just don't want to accentuate areas they don't like looking at. And you could do that and they'll tell you it's an awful haircut. And it could be perfect. It could be, I shouldn't say perfect, it could be precise, and they'll tell you it's a bad haircut. So those are things in your consultation, what they don't want. They don't want you to point out their flaws they don't like. But does that make sense? So someone shows you a picture. You have to decide, what sections am I using? In its most basic form, if they show you a blunt haircut, what are you going to use? Horizontal. If they show you a layered haircut, what are you going to use? Vertical. If they show you a graduation of any type, what are you going to use? Diagonal. How diagonal depends on so many things. So are you with me? That's the first step. What is my sectioning going to be on this client? Because if you don't know your sectioning, you might as well just pull hair out and cut. And bless you with your end result. Okay, so from the sectioning, you have to decide your movement. There's only two things we can do with hair. Lift it and move it when we cut it. The key is that you lift it and move it the exact same through the whole haircut. So one of the questions was, understand how to fix a mistake. You have to go to that point. Think about this. You're lifting and moving, lifting and moving, lifting and moving, lifting and moving. You come here and you go, lift, she's talking to me, I don't move. Then I go back to, oh, I'm focused on what I'm doing again. Lifting and moving, lifting and moving, lifting and moving. Back here, section 5, right? I got 10 sections. Section 5, I screwed up. Well, I have to figure that out. Where is the mistake? And when you look at the mistake, if that mistake is a hole, and I mean you go layer, layer, oops, layer, layer. You don't go back and go oops to the whole thing. You're going to have to learn how to texturize around, because if you oops the whole thing, you're in trouble. So texturizing around to make it appear as if you didn't have an oops is what you're going to have to do. Otherwise, she's going to have no hair. Like, you got to go to the shortest point and fix it. So the key would be focus on lifting and moving, lifting and moving. And if she talks, stop and talk to her. Don't lift and move without paying attention, because that is your hole.
What do you mean when you say move?
Overdirection.
Oh.
Because when you lift the hair, you don't just lift it. It either goes forward, backward, or not at all. And there's some form of movement. But the movement being inconsistent is why you have steps. It's why you have lines that you don't want to see. It's in your movement and your lifting being inconsistent. And it will be until you practice it. If you don't focus on it and you just say, this is how I cut this haircut, and you don't think about these two things, you will not be a precision hair cutter. Can you cut hair? Yes. Will you have like an idea of how you do every haircut? Yes. But will it look, like I said in the beginning, different, and you won't know why it looked different? Yes. So if you want to be able to create exactly what your guest is looking for, you have to understand these two things. And it takes practice. So take a doll head, lift it where you don't know what's it gonna do there, and cut it. And do that consistently on a whole side of a head and say, oh wow, it does that. Right? Because you don't know. Do you know what each elevation looks like when you're done? Unless you've done it 100 times, you can't possibly. And that's what it takes, is making the mistakes to understand.
I make that mistake in the long layer. If I don't pull it all to the same angle, so if it's, I can always tell when I'm done if it wasn't always 45, because I'll have like, where's this extra hair coming from?
Yes. And then the problem is that when you get there, how do I fix it? How do I fix it?
That's when I started.
You have to know how to before you can fix. Because the correction is harder than the cut, honestly. Sometimes, leave it alone. Ask for help. Oh, did you just, she gasped. I have to ask for help. Okay, I'm gonna tell you something. Here's a prime example. I love Krista to death. She is amazing. And she had just a question the other day about like how to start. She had a plan and she asked me in front of the guest, and the guest was like, oh, that sounds great. Like we were just talking about it. And she's got 4 or 5 years behind the chair. I don't even know now. Feels like she's been there 10 years. But then I have had to ask, like, about other things. Haircutting's not one that I ask about, but I've had to ask about other things. And I bring people in, and it's okay to ask for help. What would be worse, the guest leaving with a hole in their head or asking for help? And quite honestly, like, we're never above help, and then people feel like, oh wow, everybody's loving on me. It's how you ask and how you handle it. And so I hear that gasp, like, if you go, I don't know what I'm doing, you want to show me? You're cutting my, okay, I think I need somebody else today. Can I get a senior stylist over here? Okay, but it's, what are you asking? You could be asking a very simple question. So lead with that, like, not like you don't know what you're doing.
Right way, like,
When I'm asking,
like a natural way to act.
I say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. I'm just curious about your thoughts. You know, here's my plan. And then they can confirm or deny. Sometimes they'll be like, well, what I would do is, and maybe it's, you know, the complete opposite. But then it's like we're conferring. You know, surgeons confer about operating on your body. You're just under and don't. And before we leave today, you're going to be able to ask for help, I think. That's my plan. Does anybody else feel awkward about asking for help?
It's not awkward. It's as we're trying to build our book, we don't want to
Yes, exactly.
lose a potential client that could be an every 4 week or every 6 week client.
It's, I don't
It's like,
know.
oh, well, let me go to someone. Oh, I really
Yes.
like what that lady said, so I'm gonna book with her next time.
Well,
Or just, I feel like that will get them very insecure about.
so the way I said it, did that make you feel uncomfortable?
Oh,
Okay,
it's different.
that's the first, like, be careful how you word it. But 2, what would be worse? You going in, making a hole, and then they don't want to see anyone in our salon, and they talk crap about our salon. Or they end up in Lisa's chair because she is a senior stylist, and they were like, okay, I really want to sit with Lisa. And so I totally get building your own book, I get that. But the latter, not asking, and just going in, is much worse, I promise you. I promise you. What were you gonna?
I was just gonna reiterate what you just said. It's the way you say it. It's the way you don't say, how do I? Say, what do you think about, or how would you, you know, what I was thinking is, how would you, you know, it's all a question like that to where you are communicating. You know, I do that, I ask for help with my colors all the time, you know. So it is the way you ask that is going to, and if you're open about it, bring them right over to the client and talk to them, you know, even, it's in your words, it's the way you do it, that's right.
And so just because you're not confident, you have to exude confidence.
Well, for me, it's what Baby said, but also there's no time to act. You know, we are always super, super extremely busy. And like when, like I was just thinking when.
Okay,
Like how?
so here's my question. If there's a hole in the haircut and they're leaving botched, are we gonna find time to fix that? Think about that. If they're leaving with a hole in the haircut, we're gonna find time to fix that. So let's fix it before we get there. Asking for help fixes it well before we get there. And I get in season, we're busier, but there has to be found time there, because finding time on the back end, we're going to at that point, but it becomes a salon issue. Does that make sense? Like now everybody's scrambling and backpedaling to fix said issue.
Just curious on to their question on, is it like more of a thing that they're working on the models, or is it like paid clients that they're more worried about asking for the help?
No, paying
Paying
clients.
clients.
I mean, models you still want to have.
Yeah, no, definitely, we're not gonna
Let me try a home
I
today.
feel like because like my problem is that I don't feel confident enough to do it on a client because the level of expectations the clients have, that makes me angry.
So here's what you have to do. You need to do 100 haircuts on a doll head. You need to buy a doll head and you need to hold the hair and say, this is what it does. This is what it does. Okay, when I hold it here, this is what it does. When I hold it here, this is what it does. And just 100 times over different elevations and see what happens. Does that make sense? Because if that's where you are, then it's gonna be the repetition of, and if you do a haircut here, then go home and do it 100 times. It's literally repetition of skill is what's going to create the consistency that is required in these two. So if you're only doing it in class, if you're only doing it once a week on models, it's not going to come for a long time. It's not. It's a body mechanic that is required. I mean, think about it. Like, I can't go to the gym and lift 100 pounds today. I cannot. I cannot lift 100 pounds today. And if I do, I'm gonna be sore. Like hurt myself sore. I have to go into the gym and go, okay, today we're at 5 pounders. And that's being honest, embarrassing. Repetition would be 5 pounds for me. Right? I mean, I lift my kid around who's 30 pounds, but it's different. It's not the same movement, right? So if I went in there, so if you're not practicing your skill and you're just waiting to show up to a client, you might as well forget it. You're gonna be 5 years not understanding, 10 years not understanding. It took me 5 years, and I was in a fast-paced salon when I started with the expectation of 20 minutes for a haircut. And I screwed up a lot in the beginning because I didn't take the time on models. I was in that type of fast-paced, cheap haircut salon. That's not what you're in. So you have to find that time to practice, and you have to put that into yourself. No one else is going to. And so if you're lacking that understanding and confidence, take what you get and do it 100 times. Or 50, but give yourself a number that you're gonna do that practice skill that many times before you attempt to do it again on a person. Does that make sense? So that's what there's a discipline that goes about it. And when you're building your book, it's really hard because you got to put in long hours to build your book. You got to put in lots of practice to build your book. And to build that confidence, you have to be confident in yourself and your skill set. And this, I didn't fully understand this for 5 years because I didn't take the time. If you want to have confidence in a year, do it over and over again. Look at a picture, create it. Look at a picture, create it. Invest in yourself. If you put it on a doll head, then okay, now I can put it on a person. It looks exactly like I expected every time. Now, doll heads are not real life. I get that. They don't section the same. They look like Barbie heads when you look in there. But the end result should look somewhat like where you were going. And if it doesn't, then how can you do that on a live person? Make sense?
It's harder.
I was gonna say.
They are harder.
I think it's easier to section on a real person and.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they've got soft hair.
But the doll head, when you make the hole, doesn't complain.
Yes, that.
So make all of your mistakes there, discoveries.
Discoveries.
And then once you understand what it does, put it on a person. That exact haircut. Does that make sense? So with overdirection, because you said, how do you move hair? That's overdirection. It has to be consistent. There's forward movement, backward movement, or none at all. So when we're talking inverted bob, because it's the obvious one, where does the movement go?
Forward.
Forward. All the weight falls forward, right? Are we going to cut it forward? Where do we cut it? Back. You have to pull the hair back so that it is longer when it falls naturally. Now here's what took me a really long time to figure out. The line on the head that we talked about, right? The horizontal, vertical, diagonal. The line on the head. This is the line on the head. This is the nose, okay? And I'm going to pull the hair back. How far back?
Depends how severe you want the front to be.
But that's determined in this line first.
Like the natural.
The further back they want it, the steeper they want it, this line needs to mimic that. And here's why. Look, if they want a really severe, short in the back, long in the front, like severe, then my line needs to look more like that. Because when you draw the line on the head, which is the map that you're creating, you're then going to cut T to the part. When I say that, who knows what that means? Does anybody, raise your hand if you visualize T to the part when I say it. There is 4 of you. 4.
I want to see them.
Okay, do you understand? Can you visualize? So T to the part means this. Here's the top of the T. There's the bottom of the T. That is what T to the part means. Yes? Is that a better visualization
That's
for
what I was
T to
about
the part?
ask, is when you're over directing, do you still do T to the part?
Always.
Okay.
You change the line on the head
Right.
to get for consistency.
Okay.
This is what creates consistency, is the map that you drew on the head. Are you with me?
So your fingers should be perpendicular.
So you go T to the part, which creates your over direction backward, and then you put your fingers in line with the part. So now here, look at this. Look at T to the part here. Do you see how the over direction changes?
Yes.
So your end result is going to change. Yes?
Yes.
Any light bulbs?
Yes.
Okay. So then if they want just a slight inversion, then you make it,
More horizontal, right?
and then T to the part looks like this. But here's how you make left match right. The lines on the head. How many times have you cut and left doesn't match right? And I don't mean in length, because there's something to be said about if you're left-handed or right-handed and which side actually is a smidge longer. I'm not talking about, you know, being longer. What I'm talking about is this side going like this and this side going like this. If the lines on the head don't match and you don't follow the lines on the head, then how can your left match right? It's impossible. So your map on the head has to be, in that sectioning, has to be clearer and more. You need to spend more time sectioning your head than you do cutting. Does that make sense? Like the actual cutting is not it. It's the sectioning, the moving, the lifting. And if, you know, when I get to here, I cut left, I cut right. Oh, that's right, left, but you're left, right. Anyway, that was bad. Whew. I cut both sides and make sure that my lines are matching. If they're not matching, I'm in trouble to begin with. Does that make sense? So those things have to match left and right. Do you have anything to add with T to the part and over direction?
I'm liking it, nope.
Okay.
I taught all of that, I was just wanting to see who got it.
But visually, is this different?
Yes, that's good. I
Is-
think it's great.
Does it make more sense by seeing it this way? So I see somebody asked about face framing. The same is true with face framing. Unless you're freehanding, razoring it, or slide cutting. Let me be clear, there are multiple ways to do it. This is an example before I get shot. Like, that's not how I was shown to do it. If you think about it, I'm sorry, David, you're like in the exact wrong spot for this mirror. If I take a vertical section directly behind the ear and I cut T to the part, and here's my cutting line, and I use this length, does that make sense? It's going to be shorter here, and it's going to fall. And as long as I use my length that came from behind the ear, the length that came from behind the ear. You heard that 3 times, yes? The length that came from behind the ear. Because if you just decide, well, I'm going to cut it this short, you cut the length up and you got a hole. That's not what I meant. I see some eyes saying, I don't understand. If you take this section and you bring it forward and you're going to face frame, if I just decide this is where I'm face framing, I'm in trouble. I need to face frame to the length. So I have to bring out and then I can face frame.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, if I just decide this is where I'm face framing, when it falls, she's got a mullet. Not even a good one. Sorry, I got in your hair.
Well, what happens if the client doesn't have enough hair? Bring it. Because that's the area where I ended up fixing it. 'Cause there's clients that only have this much hair. Like this, I have clients with this much hair.
In their front.
Yes. And they want
So I will say this.
and this part, it's already cut short. You know. Then the length.
Sometimes
So.
you have to pretend there's hair where there isn't. I'm just being honest. Sometimes you have to pretend there's hair where there isn't. And you're not going, like where the gap is, you're just going to make it meet. And when you pull and it's thin here and there's almost like there's no hair. Do you get what I'm saying? Like there may be like a strand that comes forward. You're going to cut these two.
I know exactly what you're saying.
I mean, I'm just being, and you know, as women get older, they tend to lose it in here. As men get older, they lose it here, which is a whole different topic. But when you're doing a face framing on someone that has very thin, you got to bring wherever the length is forward. Like if there's nothing here, then you got to go below that. And then pretend it's there and connect, but leave the gap because there's nothing there to cut. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so when you bring it here, right, you're bringing this forward to cut, this forward to cut, this forward to cut, and then there's this gap that there's nothing. So then you got to go below it and bring that forward to cut. And then you still have a line and you're just pretending like there's hair there. You can't put hair there that's not there.
You have a line with a natural hole.
And there's nothing you can do about that, but it will connect and flow. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I think this should grow out.
And sometimes making that suggestion, if you think, now I don't know if you guys are there yet in understanding, right, to make the suggestion like, oh, you're just like, crap, there's no hair there, what do I do? But eventually you can get to the place where you can say, if this was a little longer, this would appear better, or this would flow better, or if you grow this area out. Does that make sense? So, and in that case, if a guest is looking for those suggestions, they may end up in Lisa's chair because she can do that. Does that make sense? And especially when somebody's looking for a change.
I was gonna say, if it's a corrective cut, like sometimes that might be senior stylist territory.
Absolutely. And if you're in over your head, it's okay to say, I feel so much more comfortable if Lisa did this. You're going to be so much more happy if Lisa did, or whoever, you know, I'm saying Lisa because she's here. But
Lisa's like, no.
There's no room on Lisa's book.
Or if that's the case, you guys, you can just come and say, can you help me for 2 seconds? Because I will.
yes.
Okay, even
But-
if I'm with a client and I've got
Yeah,
that
I've done
craziness in my eyes, I will stop and help you for 2 seconds. I will, I promise. I will.
Yes.
You need to come
So-
to village, you know.
I don't know, she needs like an iPad to roll around the village.
You'd be like, oh, I need Lisa. Lisa can't be here in like 7
Because you
minutes.
guys can do the same thing. I mean,
Yes.
just like what she said, when you pull it forward, so you make a suggestion, okay, you want your haircut like this, but you're missing this hair. This is the first time you've done this person. So we have to let this section grow. I say that 100 times a day. We have to let this section grow to get it to where you want. So it's going to take a couple haircuts. you
Yeah.
know.
Yep.
So, and some people, like myself, have this recession, that's never going to fill in.
Nope.
I
So
have
then you have to find ways to mask around those things.
Yeah, so
Fake it until you make
it's
it.
all your verbiage in your,
Fake it until you make it, that's what I've learned.
Well,
If
yeah,
I
the
can do it the one time, I'll say, fake it, like, oh, I think this should grow longer, so the next time, and then that gives me 4 weeks to work on it, knowing they make that next appointment.
Well, and honestly, like sometimes in the recession area, you have to compensate and make that longer because it travels further. Think about this. Think about this. When we're creating it longer in the front, short in the back, we travel it backward, right? So it's longer there. Well, if this hairline goes back to here, and I want the line to be balanced, think about that. Then the hair that goes back has to travel further and has to be longer. It can't actually be 3 inches here and 3 inches here because this one will be 3 inches to the middle of my eyebrow. So you have to compensate and think about those things. You're not actually making hair even.
Cut it where it lives.
You're making it even as an end result. Like the line that you cut is even, but the hair itself is not, because it's traveling from different places. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we're gonna do our first activity with overdirection. If you move it forward, where is it going to belong? If you pull the hair forward, where is it going to belong? In the back. If you pull it back, where is it going to belong? If there's no overdirection at all, what is going to happen?
No, nothing.
Everywhere.
It's going to create balance from front to back. Yes? Okay. So there's 8 stations. They each have scissors and a head like this. And there is hair hanging from it. So I want you to be mindful that it's taped, so it's not going to move a whole lot. But you're going to move it forward and cut it and discuss with your neighbor your end result. So I want you to go, move it forward, cut it with the paper scissors that are on your station. And then make an observation, discuss it with whoever is directly next to you. So you're pairing up. There's 8 of you, so you can have one partner. The skinny pieces that are hair on the head. Is everybody clear with the direction?
So we're gonna put them forward.
Diagonal.
You're going to use overdirection. Are you listening? You're going to use overdirection, and you're going to move the skinny pieces that are, they're either pink or purple. They're all the same color. Yes, those. Just making sure everybody's on the same page. You're going to use forward overdirection, and you're going to cut them. You're going to use forward overdirection, and you're going to cut them. The skinny ones. Yes. So stand in front of your client, as if it's your client, and you're going to move them forward and cut them. You're moving them backward. See, this is interesting. Her nose is on the left. Move it forward and cut them. Move the hair forward. Yep, like that, and cut them. I know it's difficult, it's paper. Move it forward. See, okay, so here's what happened. Finish what you're doing and then put it down. Some of you wanted to cut the line. You didn't want to move the hair. You wanted to create the line. You were like, oh, we're doing this, so I'm going to cut this. That is not how we cut hair. We move it. So this was a discovery process of me giving you forward movement and seeing how you would get there. Does that make sense? Okay, come here, come here, come here, come around. Stay right there. You're doing nothing wrong. Stay right there. Don't panic. You're doing nothing wrong. Come around. She's standing in front of the client at the face. She's bringing the hair to her. She's moving it forward, and she's going to cut a straight line. So please do so. Do that. Bring it forward.
My
and
God.
just,
You got me scared.
Oh, don't be scared. It's okay. Everybody's watching. No big deal.
No pressure.
And it's going to be wonky because it's paper, right? But look at her stance. She's combing it to her, and she's going to cut it. Just cut it to match that bottom one right there. Perfect. Because that's her length. We don't want to cut that off. Now let go, and what happens? Okay, so that is forward movement. But the key that I want to point out is this is what I saw a lot of. Okay, forward. We're not creating art. We are creating art, but we're not freehanding, is what I mean. This isn't balayage. This is precision. So when we cut forward, we stand in the front and we bring it to us. When we cut back, we stand in the back and we bring it to us. When we cut balance or no overdirection, we stand in front of it and we cut. So please go back and cut to you, forward movement. Move your chair if you need to. I know that side doesn't have the chairs moved. It's not going to be perfect. Cut to the bottom length the best you can. It's paper. Are you correcting your papers?
Because that's what Lisa
Got a point, honey.
I can't see this is straight line.
Wow. Okay, that is the level of perfectionist we're working with. I got it.
Well, that's because,
Okay.
Because we learn with Lisa, so you can't see this line.
So
right
now,
here.
how difficult was it to move the hair, the paper?
Not very much.
Was it difficult to get them consistent?
I don't think so. Too much.
So it was difficult.
Okay.
You guys were like bending hair. It wasn't. What if the section angle matched the direction you were pulling it? What is the section angle that we're using? Well, how are these hairs taped? Horizontal. But we cut diagonal. Do you see how difficult that was? Wouldn't it be easier if the hair was combed in the direction we were trying to do it? That's where sectioning plays a part. So now I want you to cut these with no overdirection straight down and see how easy it is to cut them evenly. Just straight across the bottom, no movement. They're going to live where they live.
In line with your parting.
Yes, in line with the horizontal part that they were taped in. They don't have to be perfect, I promise.
I was like,
But that is a great lesson to see how perfection plays.
Did everybody get what she just did?
Yes.
Good.
Does that make sense? So sectioning is a part. So on your, does everybody bring their pen over, or did you leave it in your chair? I want you to write something about what you just did, something about overdirection that you know, just about overdirection, moving hair or sectioning, and put it on that paper in front of you. Or you can use a Post-it and stick it to that, however you want. But something that just made sense that you just did. Share what they learned from this
I
activity.
said sectioning T to the part will help you have the cleanest cut for your plan.
Okay, perfect. And one more.
I got correct section makes your job easy.
Correct sectioning makes your job easier. All right, perfect. All right, head back on over and just leave your stuff there. We're coming back. I'm making you work today. All around. Gosh, somebody threw a pen on the floor.
That was good.
That was good? Oh, we feel good about that? Portion of cutting, overdirection, we feel good. Sectioning, we feel good. Because we forgot about sectioning and how that plays a part because the hair was taped for us. Right? And so all of a sudden we got like dumbfounded. Well, what do I do now? It's
I
taped
think
for me.
sometimes I want to freehand it because like in men's cuts, when I pull like the front forward, I do freehand a little bit there.
Yes.
And naturally,
You're freehanding, but you're following a hairline, which is different than actual freehanding. There's a guide to follow.
Right?
You know what I'm saying? There is a guide to follow. When the hair is down to here, you can't freehand along the skin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yes, you're freehanding, but there's something you're following. If you just try to freehand, there's nothing to follow on longer hair. You said something, and
I know what you mean with that, but I feel like that will be your section.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, yes. Okay, so we're good on overdirection. Okay, so if this is not consistent through the haircut, whatever you decide it to be, let's say you decide that you're pulling it all forward like we just did. If you don't pull a section all the way forward, you're going to have a step. You can layer hair by pulling it all forward. But if you don't consistently pull it, whether it's a stationary guide, so I'm going to pull it all to the same point, or it's a traveling guide where I pull it a little bit forward each time, Whatever that consistency is has to be the same from front to back. And then on the other side, from front to back. Does that make sense? If you misstep in the middle, there is no fixing. There's hiding. There's texturizing around it. There's no fixing. Make sense? How many of you cut hair and can't find your guide? Or lose your guide? And be honest. You know why you can't find it? You're not combing the hair to the same place. You're not over-directing it to the exact same spot. Because if you did, that line would be solid. There would be no doubt in your mind, that's my guide. When it's hairy scary and you're like, I think that's my line. I think. And I'm being like, let's be brutally honest. There's no client here listening to you. Okay? It's because it's not moved to the same place.
Sometimes I'll be like, I'll have two guys. I'm like, where did that come
Now.
from?
Cut in the middle.
Abs are good. Not long, not short. Right in the middle. No, don't do that. I did not say to do that. Let me be clear.
BB told me.
Yeah, oh, I can hear it now. Oh, God. What is BB teaching? It's on camera. I did not say that.
No, but I've seen Lisa doing it, like just getting another, just changing that big section and making it smaller.
Mhm.
You know, very thin.
Yes.
And she will do that.
And she has a line every single time. She has a guide every
Yeah.
single time.
I think that's too what I was saying too, is if you're not constantly aware of the angles, like if I'm 45 here and then I'm like 65, it's gonna be off and I can see it, and when I'm blow drying I can feel it. I can feel the
You can feel
catch.
there's like a lip in the
Yeah.
haircut. It's almost like instead of it going like the hair flowing, it does this.
Yeah.
Like that's what's happening, and
then
you
I
can
gotta go
feel
back in
it.
and do a whole nother
You
haircut.
can see it in your end result. You can see those steps in your end result. Even in a layer, it seems to be long layers is what people keep asking for. Even in a long layer, you can see it. You can see your steps, you can see your end results. And then you're like, I think the question for point cutting is relevant because then you're like, how do I fix it? Well, point cutting is an answer because it's a type of texturizing to soften your missteps along the way. Instead of it going like this, it goes like this. Every section isn't precise. So that's why you have to practice the movements. Because the moment a guest talks to you, your hands move. You're like combing it and you go to cut it and they say something and they move. I can tell that mine have moved because I can see that my guide isn't precise and I recomb before I cut it. And that precise line, if you have 5 seconds, watch Lisa do one haircut and just watch her guide. Watch how consistent the guide stays. It's not because she cuts a perfect line. I mean, that's part of it. But it's because she overdirects it to the place it was before and before and before. Make sense? So the last thing is elevation. 3 ways to elevate, none. What am I gonna get if I don't elevate? I just bring the hair straight down. Blunt haircut, okay? No elevation. Low elevation, which is putting my finger behind it, elevates the hair. You get that, right? Putting my finger behind it elevates the hair. How many degrees? I don't know. But it's not 0. So the moment I put my finger behind it, I elevate it. So if I'm doing a perimeter cut, when would I do a perimeter cut?
Beginning, I mean,
Every hair.
What did you say? When I'm doing layers. I'm doing a perimeter because I need a length. But then I'm going to go interiorly and cut, correct? If I'm doing a blunt haircut, that is the haircut. It's not a perimeter. It's a haircut. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the difference between a perimeter and a blunt haircut. A perimeter is the outside, the bottom, and I'm going to cut inside as well. A blunt haircut is the bottom. That's the whole haircut. So if I elevate a perimeter, I'm going to go in and do layers. It's not a solid line. If I am looking for a solid line, you will never get one if you elevate. Did everybody hear that?
Yes.
So when you're looking for that bob that guest wants, that's not inverted, not anything, it's just crisp. You with me? You cannot lift it 1 degree, or it's going to have a weird bottom. Think about how many videos you've probably seen with hair clippers where they go zzz, 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 and it's so blunt. It's not the clipper. It's the fact that there's nothing under it. Does that make sense? You can create that same bluntness with a scissor. It's because they're combing it down, leaving it in place, and zzz, all the way through. And all those hairs fall to the exact same point. So a blunt haircut, that is created by not lifting at all. 1 degree to 89 is going to create a buildup of weight or graduation. The moment you lift it, you're graduating. So when I say graduation, that doesn't mean inverted bob. Inverted bob means it's shorter in the back and longer in the front. The graduation happens at the bottom, the stack. Old lady haircuts. Are they really all the same length all over? Because is this hair on the top of the head the same length as this hair back here on all old lady haircuts? No, a lot of times they like this to taper. Isn't that what they say? Which they really don't want to taper, because if you took out your clippers and tapered their neckline, they would freak out. But that's what they call it. So it's shorter here, longer here, layered on the top. So down here, the elevation is determined by graduation. You're graduating it. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So if this is the back of the head, if I elevated it to here, right, and I cut along this line, it would get longer and it would be tighter. And that's also affected by your fingers. You with me? Because your fingers have to tuck in to create the same line that you're trying to graduate. But you would do that balanced. You might not overdirect that at all. Because if they want the back of their head tight and to the bottom, but they want above their occipital to be layered and bouffantish, if you will, right? Typical old lady haircut. Are you with me? Then you have to make this shorter than this, and that is a graduation. You with me? So then if you did a true 90, it would be like this. Do you see the difference? If you pull it straight out and cut it. If you've ever gotten a tail when you're trying to graduate, it's because you pulled this out. And it's not shorter at the bottom because the head scoops in naturally. So if you're doing graduations and you get a tail at the bottom, it's because your fingers aren't tucked in. Does that make sense? Now sometimes their hair is wonky and you have to adjust, but if you actually get the tail underneath your graduation, does everybody know what I'm talking about? Then it's because your fingers aren't pointed in and you're pulling it straight out. So anything 1 to 89 is going to be a buildup of weight. You're generally going to use it below the parietal ridge, so below this area. You're not going to use lower at the top.
Sometimes I run into trouble.
Unless you're talking like 45 off of the spot. A little different.
I run into trouble with, last 2 weeks ago I had a haircut. And like right around this section, I wanted to like rest. I sit when I cut the perimeter at least.
Yep.
And then I wanted to like elongate her neck. I wanted to like pull her head off because I couldn't like get in there without creating graduation because I couldn't push the hair strictly onto the skin and cut that way. Is there can I turn their head and do it? Will that create a different look? Like how do I get in there without?
You're trying to go
different
flat with not lifting at all. The moment you get into the jawline, there's no lifting because it is coming straight. Like the moment you're in this gap, your finger can go under because if it's not on the jaw, you're below it, it's hanging. The key is that you make sure it hangs straight down. When you're in that area here, it's tricky right here. And you can have their head this way as long as it's flat.
Will that create a different look?
If their head moves but you keep the hair exactly the same, no. But if their head moves and then you decide to lift, yes. Does that make sense? But once you get here, your fingers have to go behind it because it's flopping around. It's not zero elevation anymore. You got to make it zero. Does that make sense? But yeah, in that area, if you elongate her neck by tilting it, as long as it's resting on, then it's not elevated.
And I find it easier if their head's always tilted down.
To
And
cut the back.
The minute they lift their head up to say something, I'm like, No. Like I have
Well, okay, here's the deal. A lot of people have different thoughts on tilting and not tilting, but whatever you do, you have to do through the whole thing. So when you go to cut, you have to adjust their head. If it was tilted, it needs to be tilted. Does that make sense? Because a lot of times they'll come back up and you got to put them back down and you got to put them back down. So when you're combing, doesn't matter. Right before you cut, put their head down and then cut. If it's not, then you got to look at that too. Because unfortunately they have the ability to move while we're cutting their hair.
If you do happen to, halfway through the haircut, you accidentally started to add graduation without noticing, will it create like a little layer?
It's going to create a step.
A step, okay.
It's going to look
And
like
you will have.
you will see a step. If you put your finger under something that you want blunt, it will look, graduation won't look pretty if in certain spots. Sometimes you want to
Tension too.
Yes, you have to have, tension is a big thing. Like, I want to go into the basics with you of how you should be combing. That's not today, but how you should be combing hair for consistency, how you should be holding your scissors for consistency. Those things affect your end result. And I do have a video for scissors that I'll just send you that you should look at, because if you actually don't think about how you're holding your scissors and you haven't gotten that lesson, and that's okay, sometimes that's missed. But if you don't think about that, that affects your end result every single time. So, and like there's this new thing where people want to flip it and they want to be cool and stick it here. That's not good for your hand long term. Like the gap that
Oh,
when you
when
flip
put
it
upside down?
when you put it upside down and it like goes in between here.
Oh, I don't know.
Have you seen, like, it's a artist, like a platform artist do it, and I've seen some people have done it. It leaves like, it's not good for your carpal tunnel, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Huh? Do you do
I
it?
can hold it regular.
Oh yeah. Some people do it, and it's like fancy and cool.
Is that palm your scissors? Is that what that is, or are you talking about?
No. And nobody knows what I'm talking about, so don't worry about it.
Okay, cool.
Don't even try.
I just thought if you did that, it's not good for you, but
So
whatever.
palming is still okay?
Palming is what you should be doing, so you have full control of your comb.
Cool.
Full control of your comb. And so otherwise, you have to find other ways to compensate for bad habits if you have those bad habits. So holding your scissors is a thing, and it balances it. And there's certain things you can't do if you cut like this. The only thing that should move is your thumb. If you don't have that mastered, there's certain things you cannot do well if you're chomping. You cannot do scissor over comb by going like this. You will put step, 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 step. You can't do it. So if you're cutting like that, that's affecting your end result. So it seems silly, but those things are important. It's just your thumb that moves. It's the moving blade for a reason, not the still blade. So like those things we can dive into that are basics, but so,
So we want to keep our blade straight and just that one cut.
the thumb is the only thing that moves. Now I have seen hairdressers for years not do that, but then they also they don't love cutting, they're not great at cutting, and they're not precision cutters.
My instructor in school helped me with that with the scissor over comb with the mannequin head. He just had me going over and over.
So you mean you did it like 100 times?
Yeah, much times.
Oh, you mean like I was talking about sectioning and cutting? Imagine that. Repetition is the mother of all skill. Okay, so anyway, there's a video on that I will hand you, but there's like, if you're not combing hair and getting even tension, then it doesn't matter what you know. Your end result is not correct. If you drop your comb and you change the tension in the teeth to a different comb, your end result on the left side could be a 1/4 inch off of the right side if you cut the whole right side with one comb and the left side with a different comb. If you're talking precise, that matters. If the hair is drier on one side and you didn't decide to re-wet it because you were too lazy to get the spray bottle, then your left side shrunk up more than your right side when you cut it. It can't possibly be the same. Those things matter. And I think those things are missed, and I think those are some of the basics that Lisa has seen. And I'm not saying you're lazy, but I'm saying it like out loud, so next time you think, I need to spray this. Not because you're lazy. Don't take that personal, please. But those are some of the things that Lisa is seeing when the end results, and your end results aren't coming together because of such simple things. Does that make sense? And I'm good at articulating that. I think Lisa is good at the how-tos, but she can't articulate, like, why aren't they getting it? I don't understand what's missing. Does that make sense? And so those things, as trivial as they are so important, that the hair is equally wet. And you guys are taking longer, so Lisa might not spray her guests as much as you guys have to.
She does.
Well, she might, but what I'm saying, oh no, she does. But in a rush, and you don't want to get the spray bottle because it's not on your station, is a 1/4 inch mistake. Potentially a 1/2 inch if you're talking curly hair. And then when you're done, they look like this.
Yes.
And you go, but I cut it just like she told me. No, you didn't, because it wasn't wet. So that's why you're, does that make sense? So those are like some real basics that we have to be practicing. So those are perfection. Those things have to be perfection for this to be precise. Okay, so last elevation, high elevation, the moment you go above 90 and above, what are you creating? Layers. What'd you say? Short layers. What determines the length of my layers? How high I lift it or how much I cut off? How much I cut off. Think about that. If I take, I'm gonna use your hair because it's long and I can't visually see what mine is doing. If I lift this here, it's pretty high elevation, right? If I cut it here, different than here. How much I actually cut off determines how short they're going to be. How much weight I want to remove is determined by how I lift it. I have a, that's not my phone in my, that's that mic pack. Can you give me my phone? It's right there. I have a video that I want you to visually see. So while we're doing this activity, I'm going to pull it up, and I think I sent it to you, Lisa. Did I send you that video? Yeah, can you just find that video for me? And it shows you different elevations of layers and then what happens when you cut it there. Because you can elevate the hair here and create a layer. You can elevate the hair here and create a layer. You can elevate the hair at 90 and create a layer, right? All of those are layers, but they're all going to look different when it falls, right? So I found this video, and the person that, they're on Instagram, they have great hair cutting visuals, so follow them. I don't know, she's got to pull it up for me. I don't know, but I sent it to her. I'm like, this is great. It's just such a good visual. But everybody, I want you to watch that video before you leave, so you have the visual. So we'll pull it up and she can share it or whatever. But what you're going to do is you're going to go to your station, and you're going. So she says she wants long layers, okay? But she just wants a trim, right? Because I don't want anything off the bottom. That's how they all go, right? So, how short she wants it here. Yes, so we take that top section and we cut. And she says she wants it here. That's how much she wants off. Well, where am I going to find out what I have to do to the rest of the hair if this is where she wants it?
You pull it up to that.
Where? How do I save the perimeter? I'm in planning stage. I'm not cutting. I'm just looking, and she tells me what she wants. And she says, I want that shaggy, short layer. I want it to start at my cheekbone. But I only want a little trim off my length.
You want to see where it falls in the hair.
Okay, so when this falls, now what?
And then you can go from working your way, if you cut that first, you can go work your way up to that guideline.
I can, and I'm going to do vertical. But how do I determine how to connect A to B?
Go through the angles.
Pulling it out.
Can I go up there?
Yes, yes.
I feel like I.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like you're saying, connect this.
Wherever we cut it.
So I would like take this out and then grab the hair and find where I can connect it.
Yes, but no. It's a planning. So yes, we're going to connect those, and they're going to connect somehow. But how do I know I don't cut my length off? How do I figure out what elevation so that when I'm done, and let's say I pull it up here, right? This is where I'm going to pull it, and I'm going to cut it here. How do I make sure that when I cut all of this hair, I don't cut off my length. Because that's the deal, right? And if you start working down and you just drop out the length, if it doesn't connect, what happens?
It's like a step.
It's a shelf,
Yeah.
okay?
First of all, are we at the beginning of the haircut?
The beginning, I haven't done anything. She said to me, I want my layers this short. I don't want anything off my length. What do you do? I'm not asking you to cut anything. I'm asking you, how do you figure out what the heck do you do? We know we need vertical sections. Find the what?
Find the longest part of hair where is her head?
Where would I look for that? No. Where?
And here.
Behind the ear. So think about this. This hair, all this hair on the hairline has to come to the same length, yes? The longest piece has to be this one, because it travels from above the ear to the solid line. In the back, it travels from below the neck. So if I measure those hairs in length, this one will probably be about 4 inches longer. So I'm going to take this piece right here at the highest point of the ear, so where the ear goes like this, yes? You're going to take the highest point because that's the one that's got to travel to that perimeter and keep a solid line. Yep. So I'm going to take that piece. And I'm going to take this piece and see where she wanted it short. And I have to make sure that wherever I'm elevating this, the line that I'm cutting doesn't cut this off. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if she wants this to be this short, and I bring it out here, what's going to happen if I cut it?
You're gonna make a hole.
I'm going to cut the length off when I cut it. So I have to, and if she wants it that short, look at the length. She didn't want to cut this off. So then I have to keep going till I can create a straight line. Because cutting straight lines is what creates precision. Does that make sense? Now your guest is not going to want it this short and this long. But let's do a better visual, right? So she wants those layers to fall.
Here's a ponytail, top.
And then you take this piece, and you see how you would have to cut it here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Not with this looping.
Makes sense now.
And you would cut a straight line. Not freehanding.
Well, that's why your section is sectioned out already to the way.
So when you grab the rest of that section over her ear, you would also over direct it?
Correct. So you would bring this
Not back,
over.
The other side, I guess.
So, I mean, and mind you, I'm using my fingers,
Right.
but this is more about the visual than,
Yeah.
So that's a section cut.
this is the section. The key is that I don't want to just drop this out.
Right.
That's not precise. I mean, you want to make sure you don't cut it.
Yeah,
You want to make sure it falls out.
Yeah.
But that's the bottom half of the guide, and you bring it to, and then you cut.
Okay.
And then when I bring my next section up, I make sure that I have that section in my hand, so when I bring it up, I have a line.
Exact same point.
Yes?
Yes.
Does that make sense? Thank you. I have messed up your hair. Okay, but I'm going to have you sit there, and I'm going to have Allie come up. Now, she has 10 pounds of hair. Her density is less. If I layer her to this length, so these are the things you have to think about. I can do the same exact application. What's going to be different about hers?
Hers is gonna look thinner at the bottom, right?
She is going to look like I shagged out the bottom. She's not going to have a solid line. Her perimeter is going to be gone. It's actually going to look like I damaged her hair as opposed to cutting a healthy haircut. Does that make sense? So that is why this is so important of thinking about, I can do the exact same thing. But people are going to go, oh, you cut your hair? And they're going to tell her, oh, you cut your hair. That's going to be the response. And guess what? The response they get is how they feel about it. Thank you. Does that help hurt? What'd you say? I can't give you a hair. I cannot cut your hair. Okay, so
I think logically that makes sense. Like I get it. But
Applying.
When I'm in the moment, I don't think I would ever think of it.
it's
Until I do it over and over.
it's practice. It's practice because you will start to think of those things. And
Like
you
I would let hair fall out so that there wouldn't be a hole, but I wouldn't think to
connect them.
Over super.
But it's not always going to be that far. Think about it. They just want layers at the bottom. You're not doing that.
They usually their hair's probably a little bit shorter, and they don't want that short of a layer.
Right.
That was
That's
just-
like, that's a dramatic
Yeah, you're
situation.
being
You know what I mean?
extreme.
Like, that's the extreme
But if I
situation.
did cut a hole, how would you?
If you cut that off, there's no fixing it.
You just gotta.
There is no fixing it.
Especially there, because there's so
If you
much
cut
layer.
off here, there's no fixing it. That is why you have to always look at those pieces and say, can I do this? And if you can't do it, you have to say, I can't keep the length of your hair and layers that short. I'll cut off the side. Does that make sense? So you have to know, and sometimes you have to say no.
Yeah, sometimes you
The client, I mean, we've all heard the client who asked for 3 layers. You can't give, I mean, you can. It's not going to look cute, and you might as well just take your clippers and go zzz, zzz, zzz. That's not a haircut, but they're asking you for 3 layers. Your professional opinion is, okay, so just tell me where you'd like your layers to start and you'd like to see them. Is that what you mean? Because they don't want 3 layers. No one wants 3 layers. Do you know what I mean? And we've all seen that meme, like the client who wants 3 layers. They don't know what they're asking. And so it's your job to tell them what they should have. Not necessarily something different, but okay, this is what you're asking me for. This is what your hair is capable of. Does that make sense? Because even when we're talking color, everybody can't be a bleach blonde, right? And you have to tell them no. Well, everyone can't have a thick, beautiful, long shag. That's just not real. Does that make sense? Ooh, I get like passionate about it up here and I can't have that mask on up here. Whew. So thinking about everything that we went through, the key here is practice. Because you can have this knowledge, but your body can't do it. And if these won't be consistent while talking, I'm gonna tell you right now. You're in the beginning, your model will talk to you and you're going to move your fingers and then you're gonna go, where'd it go? And so the other thing I wanted to talk about was cross-checking. How many of you heard cross-check, don't cross-cut? Have you ever heard that? Okay. Cross-check, what does that mean?
looking for correction or correct-
Take your section and
In the opposite direction, you cut.
Check in the opposite direction you cut. That's its simplest form. Okay, if I cut vertically, I check horizontally. What are you looking for? How do you know? How do you know you're checking in the correct place?
That was my question.
Like really, how do you know you're checking in the correct place? And if you check in the wrong place and you read your check wrong and you cut it, what happens when it falls?
It'll be messy.
Recheck, you want to,
Say,
Mess. You create a
Cross-check.
hole.
oh, you created a mess.
each section you do, you want to cross-check it before you keep going.
You should be cross-checking every 1, 2, 3 sections, no more than that. But you got to know what you're looking for, because if you're cross-checking and you go, oh, that don't look right, guess what you just did? Step, step, step. Oh, let's go over here. Step, step, step.
Like
So you
when I
have
do
to know what
layers,
you're-
I pull the top, and if I notice like there's like a little section longer, then I know that it's heavier on the side. So I would just let it fall and find the heaviness.
The key right now is to cross-check, not cross-cut. See it, go find it. Do not cut it because you pulled it up. And your senior stylist will do that. But here's why. When they cross-check, they're holding it at the same over-direction and same elevation because they know how to. Just because they cut it this way, right? And they go to check it this way, if the elevation was here, they know they have to bring all of those to here. And if you miss that, you'll put a step every single time. And it's in the middle of all of your sections. Think about that. You cut 5 sections, and in the 5 section, you had this one mishap. But you went ahead and cut all of them incorrectly in the middle of it. Does that make sense? So cross-checking is for you to see what's wrong, but it's got to be held in the right place. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
So how cross-checking be in a blonde?
In a blunt haircut, you're combing it down and you're looking. There is not a cross-check in that sense. There's not like you're not going to go vertically and check your horizontal line. Great question. Thank you for asking it. But that's more of a visual, and the best way to cross-check yourself is to look in the mirror. A straight line, when you start staring at it, starts becoming a wiggly line. And then you're going to show them the back of their head. You want to look at it before you show it to them. And you want to see what they're seeing, not your eyes, because the mirror is different. Do you know what I'm saying? So, right, so you need to spin them around and look in the mirror yourself and say, does that look straight to me, before I show them? And quite often, when I'm doing a men's haircut, I'll touch them up and then I have to look in the mirror. And sometimes it's going like this. It just is, and the mirror helps me get it correct.
Where do you cross-check? Do you cross-check length behind the ear when you pull down in front of the mirror?
I think everybody does a little different there. However, the key is that the piece of hair that I get on the left is the same as the piece of hair I get on the right, meaning I can't pull from behind the ear and in front of the ear and think they're going to be the same.
Well, if they have like a front situation.
I go to ear or behind if they have face framing and all of that for my solid right here, where the hair's like top of the ear or just behind, so that when the hair pushes forward, they see balance. I'm not worrying about if they have layering. You have to cut it for the middle. If they are like a dead set part and you cut it for the middle, I need, I'm gonna use your hair because I have to visually show, you have to see what happens. So her hair is on a side part, okay? Always? Okay, so if we move this to the center and we cut it, because she says she's gonna move it, and she's all one length, mind you. When this goes over here, it's not going to be all one length. It's going to be layered because I cut it over here. But from here to here is less traveling than from there to there. So this is going to be layered when it falls over here. Does that make sense? Now the other part of that is if she decides that I cut it on the center, right? And she moves it slightly, what's gonna happen? You can get scragglies. You can get little layering at the bottom. So if you're looking for that blunt cut, it's not blunt. However, if they're gonna move their part, you need to comb it, move it, make sure there's a precise line. Comb it, move it, make sure it's a precise line. If you're doing an inverted bob and they push their hair back, what happens to that long hair that was in the front? And they push it back and it sits over top of the back. Look at what happens here when I push her hair back. You're saying yes, so you understand what I'm saying? Okay. When I push this back, do you see how this long hair sits here? Imagine if there was a stack under here. Would that make your precise haircut look precise? No. It would be stringy. So you have to think of how they're wearing it and where I'm parting it. And what does that hair do when I move it? A center part is great if you're moving your part. If they're consistently parting on one side and they want a blunt cut, you're not getting it. And you need to explain that to them. If you move this part, here's what's going to happen. Especially if it's a severe side part. Here's what's going to happen. Are you sure you don't move your part? That's actually the conversation I have, because I don't want them saying I cut their hair unevenly because they moved their part and now they have stringies. And if they're like, well, sometimes it moves, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna adjust that just a little. And I go up a little bit, not to the center, but I go up a little higher than their side part, pull that down. So if it moves a little bit, they don't look like I don't know what I'm doing. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that answer that? Thank you.
Sophie, what were you saying about you forgetting to move your elbow?
Oh, yeah, mainly, so we're talking about sometimes if you cut, like if you're holding it and you forget to drop your elbow, you might be getting the wrong, like, elevation or angle, because, like, you know, when you're, like, cutting over someone's head, you might think you have to keep your arms up and, like, out of the way, but, like, actually you need to be more relaxed so that you're doing what you need to do.
So finger angle and body position is everything. Everything. You should always be pulling to you, not away from you. Here's why. At the beginning of the day, this is easy. At the end of the day, my arms are tired. they start to drop and drop and drop. It's not as consistent. But this movement, I can do naturally, and it's not as much muscle movement. Does that make sense? So if I bring it to me, I'm gonna be way more consistent at 9 a.m. and at 7 p.m. than doing this.
Yeah.
So when I'm cutting, I should be pulling to me. That's why I commented about where you were standing when we did that haircut, paper cut, like coming to me.
Also, your fingers should always, pretty much always mirror the parting, whether it's this way, horizontal. They should always be vertical. They should always be mirroring the parting. So if you have a horizontal part and your finger is not in line with that part here, you're gonna get a diagonal cut,
Yes.
okay? That's, I think, what happened with that, Sophie.
Oh, yeah.
If I was watching you, so the thing is if you can't get your fingers horizontal, because the mirror couldn't go up and down, so she was reaching. I don't remember what you were doing.
Yeah, I
but
don't know.
Okay, this looks weird, but you couldn't get your finger in that parting, so you have to drop your elbow, raise your elbow, just think about that. If you mirror your finger with the part you just put in there, you're gonna cut it that way. And if you can't get it in there, then you have to change your, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes has absolute sense. So when you're cutting and you're creating the plan to cut, I said, you know, think about what you're doing way before you're cutting. This is like, you know, measuring a piece of wood and cutting it too short. If you don't have your right sectioning, if you don't check where am I moving it, where am I lifting it, what is my body doing, what are my fingers doing? If those things don't come to play before you open your scissor to cut, then it's wrong because the next one can't match that. It can't possibly because you didn't think about it. Now eventually you'll be like, oh, I'm in the front because I'm cutting this and I'm gonna, and it just happens. But in the beginning you have to say, okay, I'm gonna stand here, I'm gonna section it like this, I'm gonna lift it to here, and I'm gonna bring it to here. And if those things don't happen, it's not gonna match the next section. So don't cut, section, overdirect, elevate, then cut. Does that make sense? Well, let's see if we answered any of these questions and if I can answer any of them. Did I give you a better answer on this old lady haircut?
I think I want to see or have someone, maybe Lisa and I, do an old lady.
With the graduation at the bottom and the layers on
It's
top.
the back of the head, it's the front of the head where I'm having trouble.
So, and it could be her hairline has special considerations that you have to, that I couldn't even foresee to explain.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
If she wasn't health compromised, I'd probably bring her in here, but I don't know, maybe I could FaceTime somebody.
What?
Yeah,
Take a picture of her hairline.
Yeah,
because she has a lot of hair, it's just coarse and like,
right.
well, she colors her hair, but it's coarse.
But
and-
it's a gray texture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the back, I do, I short and then I go through layer. But when I get to the fronts, like this past time, I kind of just did like 90 degrees. And then just, as I was doing that, it just like got more choppy and choppy and choppy. And it looked okay, but I was like, I don't.
So her texture might require point cutting. If it's like laying
Thick.
heavy and it's thick, it may require point cutting. And there's different types of point cutting, which I'm gonna address on that paper right there momentarily. But that might require just taking a visual of that. Oops, I messed up, now what? What do we do?
Blend around. Don't keep cutting that.
Don't keep cutting that.
Call Lisa.
How can I find what I messed up?
I'd say keep walking it back till you see where you kind of lost your guide.
Okay, how do I know I'm at the right place with my guide? What should I see when I'm looking for my guide?
Consistent, straight.
You'll see that.
You'll see that. So consistent straight line. If it starts to be frayed,
Shattered, yeah.
shattered, good word, then you're not moving and lifting consistently. go back to where you were
Give me
moving
the PM days.
consistently.
I think if
I
you
know the good
recognize
words.
that
They were like they
in
were
a haircut, you know something's wrong.
She made it easy.
Don't
and
cut.
points.
Anyways, just
Here's another thing. You have to visually be aware of how much hair is falling on the floor. This is really important because you can't screw up bad if you're aware of this. If you know throughout this whole haircut, I should not be taking more than 3 inches, and all of a sudden where I elevate calls for me to take 6, you have to be visually aware of that because you should not be cutting hair until you are. Does that make sense? Like if you're not visually aware of how much you're taking off and is falling on the floor and how much you should be taking off and is falling on the floor, you have to connect to that first. Because it can't just be, well, I cut because that's where I'm supposed to. I was cutting 3 inches and now this is like this long. Clearly this is going to put a hole somewhere. Make sense? Okay. Do we have a better understanding on learning when to create the correct elevation, what each elevation does, and how to find it, that where we lifted it this time? Okay. Long to super short, where to start? In the shortest part of the haircut.
I think if someone comes in and wants a transformation, they're going
Yes.
from hopes and they say, Hope comes in, I want a pixie cut. Where the hell do I begin?
Well, you first want to make sure
After I
that's
go
what they
back,
want,
right, right.
because they might cry when you're done if that's not really sure. I just had a client go from blonde to dark, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm not loving it." And I'm like, "Oh God, okay." here we go."
Great.
You know, like, so making sure that's really what they want is the first key. But for me, I'm gonna cut all the weight off. If I'm donating, I'm gonna do 4 ponytails and cut 2 in the front, 2 in the back, so that I have hair to work with and not a big hole by cutting 1.
Do you cut on the longer side just in
Yes.
case
Yes.
Yes.
it's not as short as they want it to go?
Yes. But removing the weight is key.
Yeah, get it out of the way.
Get it out of there. Because for you to comb and then try to cut down here
Yeah.
is not realistic. So I think that's where we make our biggest mistake, is that we don't get rid of the bulk. So get rid of enough bulk. And if you cut those ponytails off and you still need more because it's too much to work with, take off more. But being aware again what your end result you're going for and leaving room to work with. But get it down closer to a trim than a haircut. Does that make sense? That would be where I would start. The next would be I start in the shortest place. I would set a perimeter for sure because I've got nothing. I've got nothing going on because I just chopped hair off, right? So setting a perimeter is a good place to start. Was that helpful?
Mhm.
Was that your question? Okay. Understand how to fix a mistake. Can we fix a mistake?
No.
Once it's in there, you can blend it, you can soften it, you can hide in it, but if you hide in it,
An extension it?
I'm gonna hide inside of it.
hide in it, hide in it. You can hide in it. I've got all sorts of words coming out today. You can make it appear better, but you cannot fix it unless you're willing to cut all the hair to that length you just cut it to. And if you're unsure and it's a small mishap, blow dry it. It might be so invisible. To you, it's like the end of, sometimes I feel like to you guys it's the end of the world because you cut this much off of your guide.
Right.
Blow dry and look. Don't try to fix that. Because your fixing will create a bigger issue than you already had. Make sense? How to thin out thick hair. I'm going to leave this for you. Texturizing, how high is too high to cut, when it's going to stick up. That's a texturizing lesson, but when it's going to stick up. In the meantime, think about that. How, like, if you go in and texturize so short that it sticks up, you need the weight of the hair. So that's where you really need to be thinking, how short can I take this hair? And you're better off to be lower than too high. How to avoid this, how to avoid holes in the hairline around the ear.
I think that was mine. I think I understood a lot from what you said, but
But I think that's a good, I
Yeah.
think that's a good visual for everybody to
Yeah.
actually see like a haircut scissor cut around the ear. I've seen Lisa do it and detail it out with a men's cut, and it's like the detail she goes through is amazing. So I think we should do that visual. How to proper point cut, I'm getting there. Tips about bangs. Face framing, did I answer some face framing questions with that visual?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And slide cutting is different than that, but that's just a way to do it. Okay. So, tips about bangs. Creating them or cutting them? Like trimming or creating?
Both.
There's 3 basic sections for bangs. A half circle or a moon, a pie shape, or a triangle. And by triangle, I mean,
Will they all be a different result?
yes. So you can go like this, you can go like this, or you can do a side part like this. The parting should never go, the hair when you take the comb should never go past the corner of the eyebrow, otherwise you're cutting into the hairline when you're creating a bang. If the parting's already there, you got to decide what's best to do. If somebody's already, well, if a client cut their own, or they've added more to what was supposed to be there, you got to decide what is best in that situation. But I'm looking at you because you have bangs. So if you look at her bangs, do you see how they fall naturally to the edge of her forehead? That's because the parting falls at the end of her eyebrow, and the bone structure is what allows for that.
That's true, because if you cut right past that.
But if you cut back,
No, but it's right at the recession is what I wanted you to see.
Yeah.
Everybody has one. Some of us have more than others.
if you go past that though, you're gonna be, it's gonna fall in here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are some basic tips. I point cut always, which is gonna lead into the next thing that we're talking about. I rarely do not point cut unless they want that solid, like, and it's rare. It's somebody who can pull that off. There's very few people that are asking for that harsh line bang. I don't even do it on little girls.
I can't even think of anyone that has that.
But it's like a rare, it's very edgy. You're not gonna do it on, you're not gonna do it on, but you're not gonna do it on your average guest. You're gonna point cut every single bang.
Yeah.
So there's 2 ways to point cut. There's point cut to remove length, and there's point cut to texturize. And here is where what I wanted to touch on, how to point cut. So if this is a layered section being held up, you with me? This is the head. Is everybody with me? Do you know where I'm at on the head? Okay. If I'm cutting to remove length, right? My scissor is going to go in at an angle. And I'm going to create the top of it looking like this, if you will. Yes? But it's a balanced line. If I'm cutting to remove weight, my scissor is going to go in like this. Yes or no?
Yes.
If I go in deep at an angle, I'm going to cut out deep. If I go in like this, I'm going to cut a hole in my precise line. Does that make sense? So your scissor goes in and out the same. You can't budge it. It's got to go. Yes? What other questions did you have about point cutting? Was that the question, like how to?
If your layers seem choppy, can you then go in and point cut the layer?
Yes.
Point cut with line holes?
Anytime you have a line, you can go in and point cut to soften. You can use a texturizing shear to soften too. The difference being, if you don't know how much your texturizing shears take out, you have 0 control. You cut it and it's gone. With point cutting, you can do a little. Oh, I still see that line. Let me pick it back up a little more. I still see that line a little more. You have a little bit more control with a point cut than you do a texturizing scissor. Now, texturizing scissors are a huge tool in your tool belt that you need to learn how to use, but point cutting is like a softer version of it.
Isn't there?
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Isn't there different ways, like, so if you have super curly hair, to point cut that to make the curl, like if you have.
I don't point cut curly hair.
Okay.
I blunt cut curly hair. And when you're cutting curly hair, you have to take into consideration the end of the curl. You don't want to cut in the middle of a curl because it doesn't get to complete its formation. You want to cut at the end of a curl. Does that make sense? but I don't point cut. Do you point cut curly hair?
And Troubleshooting, they taught us like where the curl like goes or something, you have to like point cut the V so the inside still like wraps that curl.
What?
So it's like almost like coming in at an angle to just point and cut that way. So that's cool. I like your. I mean,
I'm not
that's
sure
a new
I-
explanation of it, so that makes
That
a lot
sounds
of
like they're
sense
just-
to me.
Beveling that edge on each section, that's what it sounds like. Each curl, each section, it sounds like they're,
Like just kind of.
if you say they're cutting it into a V, they're layering each section down into that
Into the
curl's gonna
curl.
come to a point,
Okay.
rather than a blunt
Then a
curl.
blunt
Yeah.
curl. I got you. So then I'll-
Okay, so we had a cutting class last Monday with Lisa. She told me to severely point cut. I found it so hard because where the hair is, like I had to pull it all 90. I don't know how my body positioning that I can go like that.
Long hair,
Yeah.
okay.
And so another thing was, I guess I don't like point cutting because I want to make it perfect. But like Lisa told me to severe cut, but I just found it really hard with the body positioning. Like I just don't know how high should my elbow should be.
Can't you bring it?
Can you turn your hand this way?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a part of it.
that's part of it. And then how high how deep you're gonna go in as to how much hair you've got up here above your finger. I mean, that's how I do it,
Yes.
you know.
If you can't control what you're taking, if you're taking this much off and then you need to have it point cut, you can go in and solid it and then texture, go 2 inches down and do a deep point cut that way and texturize it. It depends what you're doing. The question was, can you bring it up and then drop it down? You do lose, that's what David said, like can't she, for her body position, can you
Not
comb
to
it up?
cut the layer,
Oh,
but
I
to
see.
point cut.
To point cut, bring it down. If you need tension and you move it down, you lose tension every time. And so a newer stylist doesn't have that kind of control. I see stylists do it all the time. If you're looking for precise and you move it down, you're gonna lose tension. And the reality is, like, hold your fingers up like this. Into the light. Where do you see light?
Bottom.
There's a certain point where you see light, right?
Is it here?
There's like a gap, naturally.
You're
So,
not supposed to be.
the rule,
Or you just wanna keep the top tight?
but the rule is don't cut past your second knuckle. Why?
Then here.
Because you don't have that same texture, tension there.
And it's so
Yeah.
soft.
So there's two things, and so the question was, why don't you pass? Why is the rule don't cut past your second knuckle?
I'm like,
You don't have a gap either?
Well, so the average person definitely does, right? But you don't want to cut into here. First of all, this piece of skin, you don't want to cut into there. That'll ruin your day. But the tension is not the same.
Oh.
You have more pressure between the first two knuckles than you do back here. The tension's just not the same.
I have to.
Yes, go. I know, you let me know.
Well, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. So, I don't know why we got on
What's good?
tension.
One cutting.
Oh, yes. So if your guest has really long hair and you need to elevate high, you can tilt their head forward, and then this is easier to cut than this. You see the difference? Their head moves. Same elevation, just better body mechanics. So always thinking about your body mechanics and how are you going to do this for 23, 33, 43 years, 53 years, whatever your goal is in life. I don't know. Hey, you know, I got 4 kids. I'm going to be doing it for like 103 years, but whatever.
So it was just listening.
But that being said, think about your body mechanics because that's going to create the consistency. Okay, so does everybody still have Post-its?
Yeah, the electric station.
So I need you to write on your Post-it 2 things that you will take from this class. I need 2 things. And then you're going to put it back up here. I'm going to remove these ones that